In September 2025, I was on board the family boat, which was the central vessel in the Flotilha de Gaza organized by Global Smooth Flotilla. And it's important first and foremost that you understand that everything I refer to in this video concerns the Global Smooth Flotilla specifically and not any of the other movements that organize flotillas aimed at breaking the siege in Gaza, like the Freedom Flotilla Coalition and other movements. Beforehand, I really need to say that I gain absolutely nothing from sharing what I'm about to tell you, and it's quite the opposite. Since I was there as a journalist with the Global Smooth Flotilla last year, my professional opportunities have rather shrunk. And it's worth remembering that the number of followers I have on this social media platform does not reflect the stability of my professional, financial, or emotional life. And again, to be honest, it's quite the opposite. And it's very likely that after saying what I have to say, I will be persecuted and harassed by those who believe I am betraying the cause, simply because I believe that ends, however noble they might be, and they're indeed noble in this case, since what is happening in Gaza is a genocide, and any attempt to stop it is noble, do not justify any and all means. But I really need to do this, not only out of my commitment and out of my love for the Palestinian cause, and for those who stood side by side with me on the family boat last year, also trying to navigate the issues I'm about to describe here, but above all because as a journalist, I'm bound by a principle greater than myself, greater than you, greater than all of us, which is the public interest. Taking part in the Global Smooth Flotilla was the greatest honor of my life, and I don't regret a single minute of it. I still believe the initiative is one of the most beautiful and necessary responses to the catastrophic reality imposed by the State of Israel on Palestinians. But like any human endeavor, these missions are full of contradictions and inconsistencies. And I firmly believe that if we are to improve our tools to confront this genocide, we really must be willing to speak about those contradictions and to the extent that is possible to get rid of them. What I'm about to say in this video refers to events that I and many others who took part in the most recent Global Smooth Flotilla tried to ignore or forgive in the name of our shared focus, which was fulfilling the mission's purpose to reach Gaza and break the illegal blockade imposed by Israel on a population that is being starved and subjected to genocide. On the boat I was on in September of last year, the family boat, most of the organizers of Global Smooth Flotilla were present for the majority of the mission, or what they refer to as the steering committee. A mission organized by civil society against one of the most powerful states in the world in technological, military, bureaucratic, financial, and diplomatic terms is of course a mission bound to face countless logistical challenges. But over the course of the month we spent on board heading towards Gaza, the logistical difficulties were not the only thing we had to deal with. We were also dealing with an organization whose overall ethos felt at times like some kind of cult. You either complied 100% with what was demanded of you, often at the cost of your own physical and mental health, or you risked being publicly humiliated and discredited and labeled as dissident. So criticism and expression of discontent was promptly repressed and discouraged under the argument that such postures could compromise the mission's objective. And while the mission's objective, which is the arrival in Gaza and the opening of a humanitarian corridor, is in itself very legitimate, this rhetoric functioned in practice as some sort of justification for abusive and negligent conduct from coordinators. This process of emotional manipulation was repeatedly reinforced by the instrumental use of the Palestinian cause as a moral argument to coerce exhausted participants to remain on board. Thus, instead of ensuring a minimally healthy and safe environment, the organizers imposed negligence, psychological violence, and emotional exploitation as structural practices throughout the mission. There were constant moral comparison and manipulation that sought to extend the unimaginable suffering of Gaza into the everyday reality on the boat, as if in order to be worthy of participating in a mission that was meant to be popular and democratic, we were required to sacrifice not only our bodies in the middle of the Mediterranean, but also our minds, our critical judgment, and ultimately also our dignity. Hundreds of other participants and I were subjected to a succession of lies shaped by the steering committee, that there would be a fair distribution of public figures and media personnel across the boats in order to better protect those holding global South nationalities, that there would be meaningful risk mitigation measures in place, that each boat would function as an independent ecosystem, and that the mission would not revolve around the so-called star figures, that there would be regular training so that everyone would be prepared in the event of attacks or interceptions, and that there would be transparency from the GSF media team toward the journalists on board. None of this happened. As journalists throughout the mission, my colleagues and I were repeatedly confronted with an impossible choice, a all or nothing logic. Either allow the steering committee to interfere with and effectively dictate what we could report and in what tone, thereby compromising our editorial independence and our journalistic ethics, or report the logistical and organization issues we were facing on the boats in the name of public interest and risk being pushed out of the mission, humiliated, and treated as dissidents, what actually happened to some of us. Throughout the mission, there was a continuous effort by the steering committee of the Global Smooth Flotilla to turn the journalists on board into their PR arm, rather than giving us the space we needed to carry out what was in fact an essential task, to report in real time from the very heart of the mission on what was happening, including the internal challenges we were facing. The steering committee did not fail only the journalists on board. Of these 700 people who were ready to join the mission in Tunis, many of whom had spent their life savings, had left their jobs, and put their families and dependents on hold to be there, only around 200 were ultimately able to join the Global Smooth Flotilla after a series of logistical constraints in which they were effectively sidelined in favor of individuals who were more prominent, visible, whiter, and more famous. So many of these people, with no money left to return to their home countries, were left at the port in Tunis, wrapped in Palestinian flags. The spirit of Sumud apparently did not extend to them. What I can say with full conviction is that the September mission happened despite the steering committee and not because of them. Those boats sailed towards Gaza for a month because of the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The mission happened because of us, the people who repaired and piloted the boats, who reported to the world what was happening there, who mobilized our networks to exert political pressure on our respective governments to secure our safety and passage, and who kept watching drones throughout the night, and who endured Israeli drone attacks directly over our heads. The mission happened despite the immeasurable egos of organizers with despotic and tyrannical tendencies. The very same individuals who are now facing public allegations of sexual abuse, misuse of funds, and other conduct that, quite frankly, does not surprise me. The mission happened despite the messiahs, the heroes, the celebrities, those who were there for themselves and not at all for Palestine. Some of them intoxicated by the feeling of being leaders of a cause, turning it into their profession, despite having no real qualification to do so, and quite frankly, no other skill beyond simply putting themselves on display. There were arbitrary decisions around boat reassignments, marked by favoritism, arbitrariness, personalism, and a kind of nepotism consistently framed as being for the good of the mission. Many of us felt violated in this process. The logic of white privilege not only prevailed, but was ultimately used as the guiding star of the steering committee. What they often seem to forget is that a mission is made of people. And without the integrity that only the human dimension can sustain in an endeavor like this, the faults, the fractures, the internal contradictions inevitably begin to take over. Giovanna, if all of this was happening, why didn't you leave earlier and speak out? I want to answer this question with a sentence that the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, said when we were in Tunisia midway through the mission. The moment you step on this mission, you're not yours anymore. You really become part of something greater. And it was out of respect for the greater purpose, the objective of the flotilla, the inexorable need to draw attention to Palestine, placing Western bodies on the line, that I remained for as long as I did. As I said earlier, the strength of ordinary people, those who truly cared their hearts into this mission and placed the objective of reaching Gaza above their egos, the camaraderie, the solidarity among us, ordinary human beings, is what prevailed and sustained me and so many others. For many, that lasted until the very end, until imprisonment in Israel. And for me, it lasted until the island of Crete, where I choose to leave the mission. All of this to say, guys, that the idea of bringing together hundreds of people to try to break the siege in Gaza is one of the most brilliant, most human, extraordinary ideas there is, but the way it has been, and it is being carried out by the steering committee of the GSF, for whom Palestine has become a stage for self-promotion, rather than a cause to be defended with humility and accountability, ultimately undermines the very integrity of the mission and risks turning a beautiful act of resistance into yet another source of oppression, while male supremacy and authoritarian rule.